Hey everyone, today is another installation in my Tome Topple series where I'm recommending some amazing long books. Today I'm going to talk about some of my favorite long ass classics. The first book on this list is an OG classic, and this is a book that is considered to be the foundation for the modern novel as we know it. And that would, of course, be Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. And my copy here comes in at 1,023 pages, including the endnotes. So that is pretty dang long. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, that book is so long. It was written hundreds of years ago, and if I don't speak Spanish, I'm going to be reading it in translation as well. Like, that does not sound like a good time. But don't worry about any of that stuff. Just don't worry about it and just launch into it and try reading it, because this book is just such a good time. Part 1 is like a parody, just making fun of other books about knight errants and chivalry. And then part 2 is almost a parody of part 1, where they are turning the world that we are introduced to upside down. And it is meta and postmodern before those were even terms. Don Quixote and Sancho get themselves into such random predicaments, but it is so much fun just following them from one episode to the next. And even though you think that this book is kind of going to be repetitive, they're just so absurd and lovable that I could just read this book forever. Like, this could be the only book I read for the rest of my life, and I think that I would probably be okay with that. So please give this a shot. Another long classic that I've read recently and had a lot of fun reading was Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. This book is a huge satire on society at the time / now, because it's still very relevant, but the characters in here are presented as puppets, putting on a performance for us to show us how ridiculous life is, and the characters here are chasing money and status, and they're involved in these complicated interpersonal relationships, and it's just a big farce, but it's a lot of fun because the characters are so deeply fleshed out that you still feel quite sympathetic for them as people, even when they're doing these terrible things. And this book also engages with history, so the Napoleonic Wars descend through Europe and seriously disrupt the lives of some of these characters. Thackeray basically acknowledges that he's not the kind of writer who is going to be showing us the intense moments of battle during the war, but this book does show how the political does intersect with the personal, so we can see the effects that this Napoleonic War has on the lives of our characters living their busy lives in Vanity Fair. Another long book on this list that tackles the Napoleonic Wars in great detail is, of course, the massive War and Peace by Lev Tolstoy. This one is coming in at 1,264 pages, including the endnotes, so truly massive. So this one's an interesting one to compare to Vanity Fair, because where Thackeray shies away from getting into details about the war, Tolstoy is just diving in, and he is really showing what the war was like for people involved in the battles and as military tacticians, and also for people back in Russia on the home front, not necessarily involved in the day-to-day fighting, but how the war has an effect on their lives as well. Vanity Fair is more lighthearted and kind of ridicules society, whereas War and Peace is like a heavy, serious novel that is trying to investigate what is the real meaning of life and how do we approach living a meaningful life. So this is a very serious book, and Tolstoy is not kidding around, but still, it is engrossing. I flew through this novel, which I didn't think would be possible. But Tolstoy does such a great job of drawing you in as a reader and making you care about the lives of these people, even though it's a wide cast of characters. But really, this is a book about people and human nature, even though it also addresses some monumental historical themes as well. So I think this is my favorite of Tolstoy's books. I would have thought that Anna Karenina would be more of my favorites, since it's a lot more scandalous and got more drama going on, but really I think that War and Peace is an incredible and immersive reading experience. And if we're going to talk about Russian classics, we obviously got to cover Dostoyevsky, who wrote some incredible, long, chunky novels that are so full of drama and full philosophy and general craziness that really any of his books is a great place to start. But he does have a few particularly long ones that we should talk about. We've got The Brothers Karamazov, which is my favorite of his books, and this copy is 791 pages. We've got a big murder at the heart of the story. We've got an extremely screwed up family. Each of these brothers represents a different philosophical idea, and this book is pretty intense and a lot of fun, but this is a pretty well-known book, so I would also encourage you to check out Demons, which I think is also translated as Devils, depending on which one you read. This one's clocking in at 731 pages, so again, it's chunky, and this one's also full of drama. This one also has a murder, very bleak, so much going on. I loved this quote that I found on Goodreads, and it says this: "Is Demons better than Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, or The Idiot? Tell me, do you prefer Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? Dostoyevsky is writing the Gospels, man." So really, when it comes to picking up a long book by Dostoyevsky, you can't go wrong. They're all wonderful. They're all ridiculous and bursting with life and energy and philosophy. The demons referred to in the title are different ideologies that have taken over the minds of these characters. So I learned a lot about politics and philosophy in pre-revolutionary Russia, which was great, but also, even without all the ideas going on, these are just compelling stories about people doing batshit crazy things. So Dostoyevsky is just fun. There is this weird manic electricity powering his novels, and I never feel like I'm reading a long book because I'm just so busy racing through the pages. I'm gonna go with a weird choice for my last long classic that I love, and that is the Kalevala, which is a collection of epic poetry from Finland. And this one comes in at exactly 666 pages, which I think is very fitting. So this is kind of like what Homer did with some Greek poetry. These are originally oral poems that this dude went around the country and started collecting and putting them down to paper. And these poems were a big part in creating a Finnish national identity. So Finland was a country that was passed around between other major powers like Sweden and Russia. So when the Finns were kind of working together to build their own independence, this was a big part of identifying as a nation who they were. This is kind of their origin stories and their history of the people. And this book shows an interesting progression from these kind of pagan beliefs to when Christianity starts seeping in at the end. And what I really like about this book is how flawed the heroes are in these stories. We have Vainamoinen, who can do all these cool, powerful things, but like can't get a girl to save his life. He just cannot find himself a wife. And then there is Lemminkainen, who is this reckless lover boy doing all these daring things, but he's also such a mama's boy, so that makes him kind of pathetic. Like, he goes off and he gets himself killed for being stupid, and then his mom has to come and literally sweep up his remains to put him back together. I mean, come on, what kind of hero is that? So we are dealing with a pretty weird cast of characters. If you know much about Finland, you'll know that it's a pretty bizarre country, but this book gave me an even deeper appreciation for just how strange Finnish culture is. So I did really enjoy diving into this world, and it's great if you're looking for some epic poetry, you know, looking to branch out beyond Homer. This is a lot of fun, and it is just so weird, so highly recommend this. So those are some of my favorite long classics that are just well worth the time. Let me know what some of your favorites are, and I'll see you again in another Tome Topple list next time.